All right, so that was a good talk. Let's give a next round of applause for Peter Chestna, DevOps Security's big opportunity.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so I always have this problem when I speak. I speak at a lot of conferences. In fact, I was in Dusseldorf, Germany yesterday, so if I'm a little tired, that's probably why. Everyone raise their hands. One hand. See, this is the problem. People's arms are rusty. All right, try again. When I ask questions, it's good to get like response back. Is everyone there? All right. All right, so a little bit about myself. Longtime developer, so I came to InfoSec through Veracode. So 25 years of developer, lot of experience in application security, right? This is my 12th year at Veracode. Anyone heard of Veracode? Yeah. Anyone a customer of Veracode? Nobody? Oh, great. Room full of prospects. Love it. All right. I've done a lot of development stuff. What I'm here to talk to you about is helping you understand how developers think and how to get them to work with you instead of against you. Anyone have that problem? Yes, we're developers working against you. I've done a crap ton, doing Waterfall to DevOps, monolith to microservices. I understand the architectures, the different methodologies, and I consult with the largest companies in the world on how to roll out successful AppSec programs. So please feel free to ask questions. Reason that I am so passionate about application security, according to DHS, 90% of the breaches occur in some form or fashion through software. Now, it's not necessarily the software that we create, it can be the software that we buy. You know, do you look at your software supply chain before something gets installed into your networks? I don't know that you do. If we take a look at what we protect and how we protect it, oftentimes when I go into a prospect, they talk about securing the important stuff. Right? Well, that wouldn't have protected you in the case of Target. They didn't get in through the main Target website or any of that stuff. It was social engineering, a small shop that did their HVAC, that went to their billing system, that I'm in their network now. I get everywhere. So really, it's not about securing just the important things. Open source. So, you know, great current thing. Now, I'm going to challenge the couple of speakers that have already been up here and talking about the fact that Equifax chose not to patch or knew it and did nothing. I will assert to you with pretty good certainty that they didn't even know that they were vulnerable. Right? In the case of struts, that's an easy one. I had a good conversation with some people at lunch today. It's like, all right, so struts, you could probably go around and ask your developers, do you use struts, and figure out whether or not you even have it in your enterprise. But what if it's something like Apache Commons? Do you use Apache Commons? I don't know. I use JBoss. Well, the answer to that question is yes if you're using that or if you're using struct. It gets pulled in, but way down deep. It's not a first-class citizen of something that you import into your project because I have to have Apache Commons. All right, so who has an AppSec program? No, really, nobody? I got one guy, two, three. Come on, they see the arms still aren't working. Four.
Yeah, we're an MSSP, so you don't do AppSec.
Okay, well, yeah. All right, who wants an AppSec program? You don't have it at your company, really? So does it look like this or does it look more like this? Because more often than not, you know, it's the CSNO. I am the director of no. I will tell you, you cannot ship your application because it has stuff wrong with it. We are not enablers. We stand there at the end when they're ready to go out the door. You're on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock. It's like, I want to get home. Like, nope, you can't leave yet. I still got some more work for you to do. Now, typically, in companies that have an application security program, I'm going to see a couple of different outcomes, right? If I have an AppSec program and I have rules and regulations for what can be and cannot be inside of an application, oftentimes I see this, right? There's a gate, but it's either they don't have to follow the process because there's no mandate, or it's the escalating phone calls. I'm going to make an exception. So I'm going to call my boss who calls their boss. Eventually we get up to the CIO, and the CIO says, we have to ship this because I own the amount of money that we make in a year, and I need this feature to enable sales. So it becomes a P&L problem and not really a security problem. Or if we do have a gate, it's usually this. Developers ignore the fact that they're going to have to do security vulnerability testing. They get to the end, we do our pen testing. Who does pen testing of their applications in their enterprise? Okay. They get there and like, nope, sorry, you can't go. They were hoping the gate wasn't real. It was some figment of their imagination. Now, the reason that I'm here is because the times have changed for how we build and ship software, and it's important for you to understand that because the stuff that you do today, the things like pen testing, while still relevant, and I'll show you where, are not the be-all, end-all. We can't do it at the end anymore. So if you look at team sizes and release timelines for Waterfall, anyone doing Waterfall? Okay, be proud, it's okay. Been doing it since the 50s, why shouldn't we continue to do it, exactly? We're talking 1 to 4 releases a year. It's really slow, and I got a big team doing it too. Now the nice thing about this for security is it moves so slow that we can kind of keep up with them, almost kind of, right? Now if we start moving into Agile, we're talking about doing 1 or 2 releases a month. Boy, we're really starting to cook now. How do I do pen testing if I'm releasing twice a month? I don't know. If you have it in-house, maybe you could do it, but that would just allow you to do the testing, never mind any remediations or mitigations that you would have to do on that. And it's a very small team, moving really quickly. Sometimes multiple teams combining into a single application. If we get to DevOps now, we are hauling ass. We're talking about multiple times a day and hundreds of times a year. There is no way to pen test everything that goes out the door if you're using DevOps. Who here is doing DevOps in their shops? Some people maybe kind of. All right. All right, good. This is future stuff. So let's explain a little bit how we got here. So this is what Waterfall looks like. I got my silos of responsibility, and those very much follow the way we build the software, right? Someone tells me what I'm going to build, then I go design it, and I code it, and then I test it, and then I test it some more, and then I go out the door with it, right? Now the problem with this is I lose fidelity. As soon as I do that handoff, from the time that the person says, here's what we're going to build, to the time that it gets to the people in operations or the people in security, I don't know why I built it, I don't know who I built it for, I don't know what it's supposed to do. That is a huge gap that makes these people just have to be reactive. Similarly with the people that build the application. So our developers, they know the choices they made, they know the trade-offs they made, but by the time that gets down to operations, they know the way it was intended to run, but operations know how it actually runs in a production environment with production data. And the problem there is their information never makes it back, so they go crisscross. So I don't understand the trade-offs they made or why they made them. I'm just angry because the thing shows up and it's on fire all the time. And I have to kick off these scripts every day because you have resource leaks and I have to make sure the process stays up. It sucks. So enter Agile. Now in Agile, the first thing that we did was we started to combine some concerns, which is what we're going to get to with DevOps really. We started to combine the concerns of development and quality. In the old days in Waterfall, we would say, the developers say, I am done, I coded it, here you go. And we throw it over the wall and we go off and do something else. Quality people will come back and say, not really. Here's all the crap that's broken. Well, the stuff that I broke, let's say, worst case, I did once a year deployments. Maybe January 1st, I wrote the problem, or January 2nd. I wrote the problem. I'm finding it on December 30th. How many decisions were made based upon that one bug along that entire year that are now going to have to get revisited and retested? So it's really not a very good way to run an airline. So we started to say, all right, well, let's combine them and let's say, you know what, you're responsible for quality. It's not done until it's tested. So I build it, we test it, and then we say done, and it goes out the door. But we still have this problem, right? So we still have losing business intent, we're still losing application knowledge, and we're not getting any feedback on how the thing actually performs, unless we get to call into some incident where production's down and we've got to go in and try to figure out what happened. So enter DevOps, or in this case, DevSecOps, because I actually have security in here, because I heart security, so I love you guys. Because we're all in the room when we talk about functionality, because we're all in the room when we talk about testing and requirements and operations, we have really good continuity. So we can start to give each other feedback in the room, in that team, about how things are running. Now let's think of this from a technology point of view. In Waterfall, again, once a year or maybe twice a year I'm doing deployments. If a test takes me 2 days and it is grueling and sucky like this. Now some people choose to do this for fun, that's not me. If it sucks, it takes me 2 whole days to do it, and it's just there are tears in my eyes when I'm doing this thing, but it's going to take me 3 weeks to automate that. That means my payback is not for years. I might not even be working at the company. Why would I do it? You know what? I'll just deal with it. I'll grin and bear it, and we'll get through it, and we'll do it again next year. When you start to shrink those time frames, and now we're doing a release once a month or twice a month, things need to be repeatable now. So I have to think about putting some automation in and saying, when I run the test, it better run the same way every time, because I have to trust that machinery in order to make these releases happen. When we get to DevOps, all bets are off. Everything gets automated. Everything. If you can find a way to automate it, you have to, because it will just slow you down. Okay, I'm going to make the presumption, because you guys aren't good at raising your hands, that someone wants me to explain this Agile process. So this is typically, thank you, this is typically the way DevOps is run. It's run on an Agile methodology, whether that be Agile Scrum or Agile Kanban. This is Agile Scrum here. So the guy on the left with the little light on his head is our product owner. That is a role inside of a Scrum team. His job is to look into the future and decide what the most important thing is for us to build. And he's going to build a list of those. Now, dissimilar from what we would do in Waterfall, where I say, I need to know everything we're going to build for an entire year. For this, I only need a couple of weeks. All right, or maybe 1 week. I need to know what the most important things are for us to do now. Things that customers will actually buy. So I'm going to prioritize that list. Now we're going to go into, between the prioritization and the planning, we're going to go into what's called a grooming session. Now write that one down, because this is the one that you guys want to start thinking about attending. Inside of a grooming session, we're going to talk about the story. We're going to talk about what the use case is, who we're building it for, why we're building it. And we're going to make sure that as a team we understand it. So let's say these first 3 rows here, this is my Scrum team. We're going to do something called, we're going to test for understanding. And we do this through something called planning poker. So there's the actual physical decks of cards. You can actually get it on your phone as well. You go into this meeting, we talk about a feature, and we're going to talk about how big this is. How long do we think it's going to take us? And we do this in what's called story points. They're virtual. Some people tie it to hours or days, et cetera. You're not really supposed to. You're supposed to say, this is some understood quantity of complexity, and so we're going to say, is it bigger or smaller, and by how much? So if what I'm holding in my hand is a 1, a 2 would be twice as hard. A 1/2 would be half as hard. A 20 would be really hard. So on 3, we're going to talk about the story. I say, on 3, everyone throw their card. Everyone pick up a card. So I'm going to get a 1/2 from him. I'm going to get a 5 here, a 20, and a 13. I'm like, we don't understand jack about this story. Right? Clearly there's something missing. So why do you think it's so easy? Why do you think it's so hard? We talk about it together to make sure we come to some common understanding until we throw something like maybe it's a 5 or an 8. This is a Fibonacci-ish sequence. So we're going to get to that understanding and say, all right, this is a 5. All right, now we're going to have some understanding of how fast our team can move, and we're going to have this, what's called velocity. How many story points per sprint do we get done? So in our planning session, we're going to, as a team, say, we are committing to do the first 3 stories, let's say. So that means that's all we're going to do. That entire sprint is think about those 3 things. So every single day we go into what's called a stand-up, and a stand-up is 5 to 10 minutes. You answer 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I doing today? And is there anything blocking me? These are run by what's called a Scrum Master. Now, they are not the boss of the team. They are a servant leader. Their job is to unstick people. So if he says, I'm really stuck on this, I need an answer from security on a question that I gave them, my job is to make sure he gets that answer. Other things that we'll uncover is maybe he's finished early and he's running long. Hey, can you combine with him and go work with him and help bring that story in? Because what we want to do as a team is get to everything that we committed to. Finish the work that we set out to do. We'll track that, and then at the end we'll do a demo to our product owner who will either accept or reject the work, and we'll do a retrospective. So it's usually what went well, what didn't go well, and how do we improve. And When I was a Scrum Master, it was what sucked, what didn't suck, and how can we suck less next time. Now, in this process, security is usually not involved, which is why I'm calling out these ceremonies, because this is where you guys are. Right? I hope they're doing it right. What are they building over there? And what you end up fighting for is budget. You come in at the end, after your pen test or after your vulnerability assessment, and say, here's 50 things, I need you to fix them all. Oh, whoa, we're shipping tomorrow, or we're shipping next week. Can I just fix the important ones? Anyone heard that one before? How about just the important ones? You will never get all 50. Maybe you get 5, maybe you get none, maybe you get 10, but you're fighting for that budget with the team, and what happens to the rest of it? Goes to the bottom of the backlog, never to be seen or heard from again. Right? So it gets buried because we've surfaced it too late. We found risk in the project too late for the business to do anything about it. All right, now let's talk about DevOps. This is my favorite quote. This is the one that I leverage. It's from Nathan Harvey from Chef. This talks about the entire organization, a high-velocity organization. It's not just about a team. It's not just about dev and ops working together. That's not what it is. If I am shipping software twice a day, let's take the case of my guy that's running support. So here's my support guy over here. I shipped a new feature yesterday because I ship multiple times a day. Phone rings, picks it up, says, hello, can I help you? Yeah, this feature I'm trying doesn't work. He's like, what new feature? How does the team communicate to the business to say we released this new feature? Or the sales guys out in the field that are out there to communicate about it and say, hey, here's what's coming up, here's what we're doing, here's what we shipped yesterday. How do we do that as an organization? How does the security team become aware of all the things that we're doing to make sure that they're involved in the beginning stages? So when I talk about a DevOps team, when I go to a customer, it's usually this. It's about release management, glorified release engineers. They write a bunch of scripting, they automate stuff, so that's DevOps for us. Okay? That is not DevOps, because remember that last picture where I talked about everyone being in the same room? It has to be this. It has to be the person that writes it is responsible for monitoring it and responsible for operating it. If they don't, then they won't ever change what they do. If they write crappy software and they write crappy logging and they don't have any monitoring and they can't go and debug a problem, when they get woken up at 2 in the morning instead of the ops guy, maybe they're going to think a little differently about their behavior when they're writing their software. This is why DevOps is awesome. It drives the right behaviors. All right, so where's security usually? You guys know where it is, yep. Yeah, it's right there. It's most of the time that's where I find it. It can't be. Security is whose job?
Everybody.
Everyone's. We got to do it all the time. We got to think about it. We have to help people get this accomplished. All right, so here's my strategy. Again, I talk to a lot of companies, and I know and have seen things that have and have not worked. So first of all, we're going to start with relationships and accountability. Most of the time when I talk to people, their problem isn't their tools. They have tools that can find stuff. What they can't get is developers to actually do anything about it. If you don't fix that problem, you might as well stop. We have a customer that for 5 years, scanned everything. Awesome. Fixed nothing. Why are you spending this money? It's a waste of time and a waste of energy. If you can't get your developers to fix what you find, you're just negligent. Training and remediation coaching. So to the previous talk here, talking about what do our developers know about security? And it's usually this. And it's not that it's not their fault. When they went to college, so I went to college back in the late 80s and early 90s, they didn't have that in college. Barely today can you find courses on it, and barely ever are they required. We are not teaching people how to write secure software. So guess who has to do it? We have to do it. Our company has to bear that cost now. We have this huge workforce. Nobody knows Jack. So we have to teach them Jack. And this for us, so oftentimes, this is the way security does releases. White knuckle, all the way through. I got to test everything. I got to get it all done. I have to know everything about everything. We can't do that if we're in a world where if our company doesn't start releasing faster, we're going to not be a company anymore. Especially in the financial industry, there are a lot of upstarts that are coming in with greenfield. I got no baggage. We're going to build it all in right from the start. I got CI/CD pipelines that shoot me right out the door. So I can do that stuff really fast. Guess what? They start leapfrogging those companies that are doing Waterfall. So when I talk to companies, they're a little bit panicked. I have to get to DevOps because I'm losing business. Someone's coming in and eating my lunch. There's this new market segment we want to go address. I can't do it for 9 months. How do I keep living? How do I keep making money as a company? Okay, relationships. Who knows their peer in development? Show of hands. Oh, excellent, a couple. You have to. All right, actually, let me ask this. Are there any developers in the audience? Okay, well, yeah. Okay, well, do you know your security peer?
It's me.
Oh, you're both, all right. Well, that's easy. You talk to yourself every day. If it's those developers, if it's those security people, where are we getting? If it's Jim or Bob or Jane or Susan over in security, now I'm starting to get somewhere. I have some kind of personal relationship. Do we understand how they're gold? Now, in the world where we started to get to DevOps, once we started to release from once a year, where operations could say, yeah, I can watch the software as it goes and I can figure out how it runs, and by the time it gets there, I'll be fine. To I'm shipping twice a month, where the thing is always on fire when they install it and they have to go back and try to figure it out. Because the developers are gold to release fast. That's all they're gold to do. Get it out there, make it quick. In the operations guys, I want everything smooth as glass, right? I want it to look like a mirror. Those two things are in conflict. They are not gold the same, but we throw them on the same team and they start to figure it out, right? They start to work together such that both their goals are met. They can't be in that conflict. So you have to understand how your developers are gold to be able to understand the things that they have to live with and the choices they have to make. They're usually giving you that stiff arm, not because they couldn't care about security, but because they're not paid to care. It's an important point here. If I'm not paid, if part of my bonus at the end of the year has nothing to do with application security, when you call up, do you think I'm going to answer? When you send me that PDF or spreadsheet with all the vulnerabilities you want me to fix, you think I'm going to go do anything with it? You got to understand what they struggle with. So part of the reason for walking through that Agile methodology and talking to you about DevOps and how stuff is done, you need to understand how the sausage is made. Now, I was in Germany yesterday, which is a perfect place to talk about sausages. You need to meet with them. Lunch. Go to some of their meetings. You don't have to go to all of them, but go once in a while. Show that you actually give a crap about how software is made and what their team actually does. And you got to build some sympathy for each other for the goals that you have. Because my VP at one of my first companies, every time there would be some contention in the room, we'd start arguing and things would get a little heated. He'd say, okay, everybody stop, pull out a business card. Okay, what does it say on that business card? Oh, look, it's all the same company. Guess what? We're all on the same team here. Okay? Because we're gold differently does not mean at the end of the day that doesn't feed up to something that is a goal for the company to make money or whatever it may be. There is some common goal that we're all working for. All right, so this is the big one. This is the most important thing in any application security program. I would argue in any kind of program, anything you want to get someone to do something. So I will disagree with my former speaker here about making them accountable. You want them to want to be accountable. You want them to take accountability voluntarily, right? I am responsible for the software that I write. That doesn't just mean functional aspects. That means non-functional aspects. I'm responsible for the outcome. If it's insecure, it's on me. I need to fix it. Usually, it's a security team problem. They have to go figure this problem out. It's not my problem. They're putting compensating controls in and tuning WAFs and all that other crap, which doesn't fix the heart of the problem that I keep making the problem worse. Right? The problem doesn't tend to get better that way. So we need to have that accountability. It has to be shared. So we have to find some alignment in our goals. That means the CISO needs to work with the CIO and say, you know what, security is important for development. So me as CIO will say, I'm willing to be measured on it. And guess what that means for all the people that work for them? They're going to start to get measured on it. We're going to start to do reporting on it. He's going to say, hey, Bob, why is Lisa's team doing a much better job on security than yours? You better go look into that. And that starts to filter down the organization. It starts to create the right outcomes and the right behaviors. Has to be in their goals. They have to be part of what they get measured on at the end of the year. You will not get any effort out of them. They're going to work towards their bonus. They're going to work towards their salary. And again, measured and reported. Agree on metrics or agree on reporting transparently, not some hidden document that only goes to the CIO or only goes to the development leaders. It starts with the application team, their management, all the way up to the CIO, who reports then to the CEO. And then the CISO and the CIO are sitting in the same room reporting to the CEO saying, here's how we're doing on security as a team. All right. We have this thing at Veracode called the State of Software Security. We have a software as a service, which means we have access to lots of data. We take a look at that data and try to find correlations between what we do and the outcomes that we see. So first and foremost is training. As I said before, developers were never trained to do software security. We have to teach them. One of the ways that we can teach them is on-demand learning, e-learning, right? We have measured companies that have e-learning versus companies that don't, a 6 times difference. That is huge. 6 times difference in how fast they're able to remediate their stuff if they have access to this. Now, we can do this also through instructor-led. So my favorite saying is I'm going to fill a room with pizzas, and then the developers come because developers love free food, and I'm going to get to talk to them over their lunch for an hour. So what am I going to talk to them about? Well, what if we used the scanning tools that we have to create some kind of heat map and some kind of thing that says, hey, you know what? SQL injection, again, is our highest problem. People keep creating them. So when I have the pizzas and the developers in the same room, I'm going to talk to them just about SQL injection, not about how to do secure coding. It's like, who cares? That stuff is important but not critical. Let's talk about something that they're doing today that's hurting the business. Now, as a byproduct of that, I can take that and now measure the effectiveness. Because if I'm doing my measurements regularly of my application security, I should see SQL injection start to go down because I've trained them how to do it. Either that or I find out that I'm not a very good trainer and I need to find some other way. But I can measure the effectiveness of that. Now, if you do that in something that matters to them, you will get their attention. And if you feed them, they will come. All right, so for all of you in the room, who's read the Phoenix Project? All right, a couple hands. That's the first thing. If you're going to start learning about DevOps, read that. It's an easy read. It's a novel. It's a story that kind of goes through this fictitious company and the problems that they had. You could read it in a weekend if you wanted to. The DevOps Handbook actually has security in there. See, security. That's pretty cool. First time you see that. This has chapter on chapter about different aspects, case studies on what the effectiveness of DevOps can be inside of your environment. It is a good read. This is not something you have to read cover to cover. I have. You don't have to read it from front to back. You can jump around inside a chapter. So you guys can start with the security chapter if you wanted to. All right, so next, we have to help them fix what they find. So if I say you have an XSS, and they say, huh? You got a SQL injection. What the hell is that? They don't understand because they weren't trained. So oftentimes this is portrayed as we think they're stupid. It's not they're stupid, they just haven't been taught about this stuff. There's lots of things that we don't know about their world as well. Fortunately, get to bridge both worlds, but we need to be there to help them fix it. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we can scale that kind of a program, but we need to provide them something, whether it's us ourselves, some outsourced agency that provides that kind of service. But what we don't want is them grepping around and doing Google searches and maybe finding something that's good and maybe not finding something that's good. And what we've measured, that we have a consulting service that does this. It's called a readout call, where we walk them through. This person is called an application security consultant. They are experts in security and experts in the language that application was written in. They speak developer. so they can walk through those vulnerabilities, help them understand why that is actually a thing, because usually what you get back is, that's a false positive. That can never happen. So we help explain to them why that is a thing and how you would fix it. So we see a 2.5 times improvement in how fast they're able to fix these things. All right, so how do we scale? Typically 100 to 1 or worse for developers to security people, or at least application security people, or if you got a security person, it's like this much of their job. So this comes up a lot at InfoSec conferences these days, and this is about extending your reach, about creating a force multiplier, right? Creating the eyes and ears inside of those teams. So as we talk about having, let's see, at some of our largest customers, 8,000 applications. Oh my God, that's mind-bending. And teams, hundreds of application teams. How do you possibly go to all of those ceremonies? How do you go to all those grooming sessions to make sure that they're talking about security? You cannot. It is physically impossible. We just talked about the gap in cybersecurity talent. You can't even hire enough people if you wanted to. You have to build it into the people that are already on the team. So what we have done and what we've seen other companies do is we get volunteers from each team. Voluntold is okay. But we get volunteers at least one. You'd like at least one. 2 would be great because I don't like bus factors of 1 as a former engineering manager. And they get some specialized training. Now you sell this to people by saying, hey, look, we don't have to go hire people we can't hire. We're using resources we already have. And to sell it to the developers, you say, you are now more important not only to this company, but in your next job. If you can put down cybersecurity expert or application security specialist or something like that, you are now more employable. Win-win. So we're going to give them some specialized training, talk to them about CIA, talk to them about threat modeling. We're going to give them some grooming guidelines. Now, these usually appear in the form of some simple checklists. So we're going to start simple and build on that. So the longer they're in the program, the more training they get, the more they understand. So we're going to give them some guidelines. For instance, if this touches crypto or this touches authentication or authorization, pen test, right? Some simple stuff. Other things, we'll use the automated tools because they can find it better, faster, cheaper, earlier than we ever could. We're going to teach them how to do secure code reviews. Not for everything, but some certain easy things for them to go and spot. So that way when they're in their grooming sessions, they say, hey, you know what? I see you're writing SQL in that. I want to make sure that we do a secure coding assessment of that before you are allowed to merge that. So that becomes one of the things in their definition of done. So actually that's an important thing. Part of what happens in an Agile team, which again migrates to DevOps because we run it on Agile, is the concept of definition of done. So if I have to build something, I have a story that says build this clicker. There's a checklist that I have to go through to say, did I do all of these things? Did I test it for functionality? Did I add new unit tests? Did I do security testing on it? That becomes part of what they are expected to do before they can say it's finished and ready to go to a customer. So we add that in there. So we can add that in our grooming sessions through these security people. Basic security controls, and guess what? We get to do some fun stuff with them. So we'll get together on a weekday at lunch. Everyone brings their laptops. Let's do a CTF. How fun is that? Developers actually like doing that stuff and understanding the other side. So if I'm going to be the guy that's attacking, maybe I think differently about defending. And critical part here is they need to know their limits. They are not infinitely powerful. I have a longer form talk on building security champions programs if you're interested to talk to me. But there's a point at which they say, I'm over my skis. Please, security expert, come in and help me. All right. Holistically now, we have to fill this gap with tools. If we are running at a pace of multiple releases a day, you need something to catch the easy stuff. I don't want to pay a pen tester to go find my SQL injection. Oh my God, why the hell would I do that? Those people are far too valuable and can find really cool things and hard to find things. I do not want them finding my SQL injections. Would you agree? Do you enjoy that? Yeah, but that's the easy part of the job, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to start doing static analysis the second they start writing code. Day one, in their IDE, watching them as they code and pointing out the things that they're doing wrong. We're also going to start looking at open source risk. So we talked a lot about that today. I want to know what they have in their software. I need to create a software bill of materials before I go to production. Because, and we'll go back to my security champion, the other thing that they are responsible for is they're part of my incident response team. So CVE thus and such gets created. We get together and say, are we vulnerable? I don't have to do that work. Security champions, please report back to me by the end of today on if you use this library, and if you do, what you're going to do about it and when you're going to have it patched. Done. They're part of their job is to be part of that incident response team. You can't do it as one person. I would argue that if Equifax had this, they would have been patched long before they were exploited. If you don't know what you're shipping, you are screwed. Because like I said, it's easy to understand if I have struts, hard to understand if I've got some particular version of Apache Commons, which ends up, if you look at it, in over 80,000 libraries inside of the frameworks. It gets pulled in everywhere, which means it's in millions of applications. Are you vulnerable? Probably, but how would you know? So I'm looking for that from the very early stages of coding. Now, as soon as I have something that can run, again, to save on costs and to make myself run faster, I'm going to use dynamic analysis, which is cheap automated pen test. It can't do what a pen tester can do. It can't. But that's okay. It can find things like, hey, you misconfigured that, or you didn't do this, or you're leaking that information. That stuff's super easy to find. You can find it quickly and cheaply. If I'm going to pay a pen tester, I want them to find the hard stuff. So let's find that with dynamic analysis. And by the way, we go all the way into production with dynamic analysis. Why? Because typically, especially if we're running old school on our own hardware, we've got a quality lab, and we have a staging lab, and then we have our production environment. Are those maintained by the same people? Do I get patch management on my QA systems? I doubt it. Do I configure everything the same? Well, maybe at first. But when a problem happens in production, the ops guy goes in and he makes a configuration change. Do you think he comes back and makes sure that QA is changed and staging's changed? Doubt it. Who has time? It's until you get to that infrastructure as code where if you touch it, you got to change it in the code. You cannot change it on the machine because it will just be overwritten. That's the place that we're going to. But until we get there, we need to start looking for this stuff because the configuration just diverges. And then we have this thing called RASP. Anyone heard of RASP? Right, so this is a smart agent that sits inside of the running application and watches things happen. So it can find easy stuff like SQL injection or cross-site scripting. Now, let's say that my application security program is just starting out. I can protect myself while I go back and fix them. I don't want to leave them that way forever, but it's a mitigating control. It's something that can protect me a little bit, and then if I miss something, maybe it's the airbag that saves the application. Okay? Security team, big important job. We're starting all the way over here. Threat modeling, security grooming, talking about secure design, helping those teams in the very early stages before they make the mistake. Because after they make it, after I've knit the whole damn sweater, and I got to come back up to here because I dropped the stitch, I got to unknit the whole thing and then reknit it. That is incredibly expensive. So our CTO, his dad used to work for GE, jet engines. So build jet engines, right? When do you think the right time is to figure out that a fan blade is going to break? Is it when it's in the test stand and I rev it up and the thing comes apart and shatters and loses millions of dollars? Well, what if I could have x-rayed it when it was coming in the door and I make sure that that faulty part never makes it in? DevOps is all about testing as early as possible to find these mistakes and fail fast, so that way that stuff doesn't happen, or at least it's very unlikely. And if it does, then I'm going to add a new test, and that new test will hopefully save me the next time. So we're there to help them. Big important part in the middle here, and it's big on purpose. We've got to help them fix what they find. If we have an application security program that only does scanning and identifies vulnerabilities, and that's what our job is to just get the list, who cares? What are we there for? We've got to reduce the risk. And at the end, we can do our red teaming and our pen testing. That stuff is all still valuable and can lead as feedback loops back to the development teams to make them better. So if I have red-blue team, I can say, here's threats that we see or here's threats that we've figured out. We can add that into our threat models. We can make our development teams better over time. All right, so right-size testing. Anyone heard the term CI/CD pipeline?
No.
The straight man. All right. So this is an actual pipeline for a microservice from a DevOps team that I built. And my instructions for them were, when this gets checked in, I want this to be a completely lights-out deploy. It was a greenfield project. We're starting from scratch, so let's build it right the first time. I want to build tests that I trust, and those will take me all the way to production. So here's my backlog like we talked about. My developer comes in, and now we're going to do our standard build and test, which they do now because they were agile. We're going to add into that definition done static analysis. Take the test before you take the test. It's no different than taking your CISSP or your CSSLP, right? You take all the practice tests you can because by the time you get into the test, you're going to blow right through it, right? They need to know that when they scan something and it says it's clean, that it's going to be clean later because we're going to retest, right? That's what our assurance testing is for. But let's take care of the problems here. And by the way, when they start doing this, they're going to start to educate themselves. So eventually, and I've proven this because I have developers that have been working for me 8 to 10 years, it comes out of here secure. Isn't that the best world that we could be in, where they actually write it securely the first time? I don't have to find it. I don't have to track it. I don't have to chase them and beg them for a budget. They just don't do it. Again, that's before check-in. Now, quick pause. Whoop, manual testing. Pen testing is important. I believe in it. But I only believe in it for certain categories of stuff. That's really, really important because it's expensive, not only in cash, but in manpower and in calendar time. DevOps, if you're releasing twice a day and you start measuring tests in calendars, those things don't work together. So we're going to pull those things aside before we do the final check-in. So this is release candidate. When it gets in there, I'm done with it. If you identify in your grooming session that it has to do pen testing, fine. Put it in an environment, say, hey, pen tester, go at it. I don't care how long it takes. It will wait. I'll do other things. Now he goes and does his pen test, comes back to me with some results. We work through them. I fix them. We're both satisfied. Now I check in. Don't put people in the rest of this process. What I'm about to show you, no people should play here. All right, so now on every check-in, because this is very small, low surface area microservice, my CI server is going to come up. We're going to build, and we're going to run some tests. Now, this is this typical static analysis stuff of lint plus code complexity plus code coverage, unit tests. I'm going to introduce static analysis in here because that's my assurance test. Did they follow the procedure or not? And I get my result. Now, this is the CI portion, the continuous integration portion of this pipeline. It's like sniff test, stuff I can do without the code actually running. It doesn't even have to be functionally complete. I can run some tests to say whether you're doing well or not. If they're not, and I choose to, I can break the build and synchronize to backlog. Another key step here, put the crap that you want them to do in their backlog. If you give them lists and you give them spreadsheets and you give them PDFs and you say, go to this other management system that has all security vulnerabilities, your stuff will never make it to the top. It has to appear as a bug in their backlog for them to do work. When I was in charge of a Scrum team and someone says, hey, are you doing this? I'm like, well, tell me what the number is in Jira. If it's not in Jira, it's not getting done. I promise you that if I don't have a work item for it, it's not going to happen. All right, let's presume developers did a great job. They followed all the right process. Now we're going to go into operational environments. We're going to start with our multi-tier, right? QA to staging, maybe UAT, and then our production environment. I'm going to run more testing on it. So I'll run some automated regression testing. I'm also going to run dynamic analysis against it. In certain places, this works very well. So this happens to be a single-page application written in Angular, very low surface area, runs very quickly. In other places, that might not be the case. Maybe you need to do some more pointed scripting against your dynamic analysis to make sure that that works. And again, I'm going to get that pass-fail. We move on to the next stage, or we break and we move all the way back. So this is the CD, continuous deployment or continuous delivery portion of this. Sometimes this can go all the way through to production. In this case, it does. I trust these tests, and it just goes. There are other places where you have your cab, or you have other places that you need to go for approvals, and there's button pushing and stuff. That can still happen, but automate as much as possible. All right, so wrapping up. In conclusion, You got to learn this stuff. If your company's going to DevOps and you don't understand it, no one's going to talk to you. You have to be able to speak developer. Okay? Get into their world and be able to go to them and talk to them about their ceremonies, talk to them about creating a security champions program, build the relationships that you need, and you need to work at the very highest levels and the very lowest levels. You can't cold call into an individual contributor and say, I need you to fix this. You need the highest levels of your company to agree that this is a problem that we are going to address as a top concern for the company. These are boardroom discussions today. You don't think Equifax, we lost the CEO, the CIO, and the CISO, all within a week. You don't think the board's talking about these? You don't think the C-suite's talking about this? Get it on their roadmap. It's a great opportunity. And get it part of the yearly goals. You have to train them. They're not trained, but you can't throw them out because who are you going to hire? Even the newest college graduates might have this much. I was talking to someone yesterday. She just graduated from college. I said, did you get any security training? She goes, yeah, I got some network training, network security. It's like, well, it doesn't help me for AppSec. They're not trained on it. You have to do it. And you have to adjust to the speed of DevOps. So you can still do your pen testing. I'm not here to say you can't. I'm here to say it is important. Let's do it at the right time and for the right things. Let's flesh out all the easy crap that we can find through other means and automated tools that are very low cost and very quick, and flush those out first. So that way I'm not paying this guy a crap load of money to go find a SQL injection. It's not very interesting to him. Now he makes money on it, but I'm sure you'd rather go crack some hard problems. Say, you guys think you got this done. Let me figure this out. All right, that is it. I am happy to take questions. Yes, sir.
If you go back to slide 23, I'm curious as to what guidance you would give relative to shops deploying software as a service in a modern scenario,
Yep.
and even in a blockchain Ethereum in some future capacity relative to what you've outlined here.
So I don't think this looks any different for any kind of software, whether it's shrink wrapped or not, right? You still want, like I said, this is, in terminology that we use in the industry, is called shifting left. I'm sure you guys have heard it, right? It's shifting not only the accountability left, but also the tool chain. It's only in the last year or two that these tools have become high enough speed and high enough quality, in other words, false positive, false negative rates, for us to be able to stick it into the development team, give it to them raw, and then they can actually do something with it. So this is about finding those things early. So there are other things that you would include in here depending on your release model and depending on where you were going. We run a SaaS business. This is how we do it. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Kind of similar question, I guess. You mentioned working with different kind of shops. What about for offshore development teams? Do the strategies change, or what have we found?
All right, so offshore development teams. It's critical that you get this as part of the contract. So if I'm going to hire this side of the room to go off and build me something, I need to provide clarity on what exactly they're going to give me. It's not some functional requirements. It has to combine the non-functional. And by the way, if you already have a contract, you might be able to squeeze it in as a quality issue because security equals quality. A bug is a bug. So you need to find a way to enable them. Now, depending on where they are or how they work, you're going to have a hard time with training because in some states, you are not allowed to train them. By law, you cannot train them. So you need their employers to do the training. You need to build that into the contracts. That I expect these outcomes, they'll start to figure out that if they start to train them, maybe they're going to do it faster. So this is all about understanding what your requirements are, providing that clarity in the contract basis, and then holding them accountable for it. So it's no different, but there are usually some restrictions. Yes?
Do you suggest plugging the static analysis stuff directly into like Rally or whatever toolkit you use to put the defect in?
Yes. Yes. So we're talking about, in this case, we're working in an IDE. In this case, this plugs right into Jenkins. Okay. And in the case that I'm going to put this in a backlog, there are first-class plugins for lots of different systems. So the ones I specified are the ones that we use, but build systems, IDEs, bug trackers, there are integrations usually for most of the tools that you can go out there and look for. I would make sure that they have those as part of the cost of doing business with you, part of the critical criteria that you need. But yes, and a lot of them are scriptable too, so they have APIs. So if you have some unique system that you built, you can get an integration as well. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Very good question. It's usually part of an item that you talk about. So you have that security champion in the room. When we bring up, hey, I want to add this checkbox or this workflow into the application, we're going to say, all right, well, let's talk about threats here. What are we worried about? How are we going to secure it? What are the security things that I need to make sure are done as part of this task? Now, again, everything that the team does has to be worked. So let's say we're going to do a threat modeling exercise. That actually becomes a story in the backlog that the team takes in because it takes real time, and it becomes part of their sprint deliverable. This month, this week, we are going to create a threat model, or we're going to review the threat model. It's actual work. It gets costed out like everything else and gets done like everything else. Nothing's free. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yes.
Seen any security teams doing user stories around identity, privacy, those types of things? So not just being the reviewer of others, but actually creating the user stories themselves.
Yes, and even better, teams actually writing the software. So let's say I need cleansers. Who would need those? So what if the security team actually put on the shoes of a developer and wrote some libraries that would go through and say, this is the standardization function. Here's the output encoding function. If you guys use this, we will support it, and we are responsible for the security of it. So we can standardize in our companies how that's done, and guess what? You get to start learning that development isn't really as easy as you think it might be. How are we doing for time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. 2:20. Okay. Anybody else? I'll be here for a little while, not much longer, so if you want to talk to me, I'll be outside. Thank you very much for your time.